Why would we read the diary of an 18-year-old girl? Couldn't vote, never gave a speech. Nobody ever read this except her. You know, why? And that gives us a Southern woman's perspective we've not had yet. From March, we've had a good representation of the way that Northern women were thinking, even of the way an enslaved woman was thinking, but white Southern women come here. And what you can see is that the fury they often brought to their letters and diaries and conversations, but also the sense of frustration that they're not wearing pants. Okay? They're furious at one times that the guys won't defend them, and other times they're heartbroken that these guys have abandoned them or are out dying of typhoid in some godforsaken tent on the Virginia Peninsula or something. And I didn't assign it here, but later in the diary, her three brothers all died that she's talking about here with great love. And she just, I got chills just now because I've read it quite a few times, and it's like, what have we done in God's eyes that he would take three boys? All we cared about, what would the boys say when they got home? What would the boys do? We were so proud of it, and now it's all gone. So I think it's good, too, that not everything's a public pronouncement or a speech, but sometimes you're just alone with your fears and doubts. Her dad had been unionist. Now the federal troops come up, and she can't wait to spit on them unless one of them's cute, and then maybe later she's criticized for being too friendly to the federal troops, at least as she presents it in the diary. So you can see there, too, that on the home front, too, things are not settled in 1862. Now, people might say, well, you do have Frederick Douglass's speech, but what were African Americans doing at all this time? Well, here's a case where you can say, you know, in the last week, and this is also a tease to get them back, we read the account of John Washington, who talks about being in Richmond at the time of secession. And so, but what if you are African American in the South right now? If white Southerners don't know what to do, what are you supposed to do as an enslaved person? Okay, well, we know that they went to the Union as soon as they could, if it was possible. But in the meantime, it might be nice just to kind of lie low, right? And just to see what's going to happen. So John Washington, who we see long for freedom, couldn't do anything in 1861. But as the Union soldiers get closer up the peninsula, he says you start seeing people run away. And they begin thinking about that. So, as Franny says, the point is not to tell people what to think. These things were chosen precisely to get people to talk, to maybe change their minds on their own, or maybe change the minds of a neighbor or a friend, or at least think that there are new things to learn about something that we think that we've already exhausted. Maybe have a clear sense of what actually happened. I guess that is one thing I would insist on. As no matter how democratic we might be, it actually matters what people actually said and what actually happened. That scholars and librarians are the keeper of the record, and the record matters. You can't just make up stuff about, you know, what a historic event you wish that it had meant. And so, one of the things I would encourage people to recognize is that there's not only more to learn, but what people actually said, you can't just brush it away, whether you agree with it or not. Whether Henry David Thoreau is a hero of yours or not, what's he actually saying here? And you look at Abraham Lincoln's inaugural speech, whatever you think about him, you're uncomfortable about something in there, right? And that is not to condemn the past. There's nothing easier than to sit in moral judgment of dead people. But there are no bonus points from proclaiming your moral superiority over people who can't fight back. So one of the things that I think is always important is to say, what's kind of like this today? When we say use the vegetarian example, I hope I've not outraged any beef eater in the room or anything. But the whole point for me of doing all of this is the resonance of these struggles of our own time. We're all uncertain about most of the things that we confront. That's the human condition. And so by establishing a personal connection with Mark Twain, or Sarah Morgan, or Henry David Thoreau, or John Washington, and imagining for a minute not that people of the past were either better than we are or worse than we are, but people like we are. I think this fulfills the goals of the National Endowment for Humanities. It's about humans. It's about establishing human connection. So, somebody was mentioning yesterday, they were American studies. Well, so am I. And I see this as a literary as well as a historic exercise. We're reading text, you know, and I've assigned things that I think have merit as a piece of writing that are worth analyzing, like a poem or a short story. Sometimes they are, but sometimes a speech has a structure. Why does Frederick Douglass go on so long at the beginning about how great the Founding Fathers were? Well, after you finish it, you realize that he's setting them up to say how far we've fallen or what hypocrites we were. So at first you're going, why am I reading this? Right? And it's just fine to acknowledge to your readers. Life is short. Why did I ask you to spend 90 seconds reading these 5 paragraphs in which he's extolling the Founding Fathers? Why did they not just replace that with ellipses? And so by looking at the way that he then counterpoints that with that blistering attack on the American nation, it's only after you've seen that he actually loves what the Founding Fathers created that you can see that tension. But you can also see he's actually imagining how Civil War might come. How might this actually end? How did the Revolution come? People imagine themselves into being a new nation. He knows that Americans can imagine themselves into greater things than seem possible with the dispiriting elections of 48 and 52 and 56. So, as Franny quoted that, I do this thinking about these worst parts of American history precisely because I think it can empower us to have faith that we can make things better again. This is a discouraging time in American history. But it's always been a discouraging time in American history. And I think that our 24-hour news cycle and so forth gives us no sense of historical depth. Because we've come to recognize, well, why pay too much attention to this? It's going to be different in the next broadcast. So we feel that we're sort of floating disconnected from the past. And people who care enough to read these things and come join you in your libraries, I think are our best hope. But they're willing to be thoughtful about this. Maybe they'll go talk to other people. So I see this not as, you know, as people in the airplane said, I just always hated names and dates, but rather it's about, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the connection to the past and the present and what it might mean about a connection to the future. So that's what I would say to folks if I had them. You'd see that what I just tried to do is make sure that I acknowledged every piece of the writing. I acknowledged things that they might have found boring. I acknowledged things that might have seemed problematic. I put my own cards on the table that I'm not trying to sell them anything. I hoped I made it clear that anything they want to talk about is fair game, that the whole idea is that there's a lot of things here that are interesting that I didn't just mention, that the book is not closed on these issues after today, that we'll come back together and watch these things unfold over time. So those were things that were between the lines of all the things that I just said. And the spirit of them all is, I'm just here as an ally. We're here to do something that for which there are very few places in our culture that you can get a chance to do. The public libraries of this country may be the most precious spaces that we have, along with our colleges and universities. And having joining together, people come together for no purpose other than understanding, seems to me what's best about this country. So thanks very much.